Please give me a hand as we welcome Philip.
We're going to be talking here for about an hour and a half or 2 hours, and I wanted to make sure that we're going to take a break. And if you guys want to cut out, that's fine. I understand. That's all part of the user experience, right? I always like to start off this talk with a little story. And I was talking to my cat, and I assure you no real cats or mice got hurt in this story. I was talking to my cat the other day, and he was telling me that he was trying to catch a mouse, and the mouse was in the wall, and there was a little hole in the wall, and the mouse would stick his head out, and he would look at the kitchen because he was really, really hungry. And every time he saw the cat, the mouse would run back into his hole, right? And then finally, he did this a couple times, and he realized that the cat realized that he was not going to be able to get the mouse if he was right there all the time. And so finally, the cat decided to get out his mobile phone, and he went and he talked to his friend, Mr. Dog, and he said, "Mr. Dog, could you bark into my phone, please?" And so he used the recorder on his smartphone, and he recorded, he recorded it, right? And he goes back to the door frame where he was hiding behind the door frame, and he plays his, and the mouse hears that, and he goes, it's safe, I can go. The cat is gone because the dog is here, right? And the mouse runs out, and all of a sudden the cat sees him, and he goes, right? And he picks up the mouse, and he's just as he's getting ready to eat it, the mouse says, "Wait a minute, that's not fair. You tricked me." And the cat says, "These days, if you don't go mobile, you're screwed." And he proceeded to eat the mouse. And that's where I'd like to begin the talk today, because that really is true. You know, it used to be that you could have a half-baked mobile site and you could kind of get by. But these days, expectations have really, gone up. Just a little bit about me, but we don't have to talk about that. So this is the way the mobile landscape used to be, right? Nobody there. Then it was like this, maybe a few companies had a mobile site. And today, it's like that, right? Everybody's got a mobile site, everybody has a mobile app, and you have to compete with everybody else around you, just like that. And so mobile UX is something that will enable you to differentiate yourself and, raise above the pack, and hopefully you can win. I never seem to win, but maybe you can. A little bit about my UX background. When I first started my working career at age 15 and 8 months, I started working in a factory. There's the actual factory. I got a picture of it. And I learned in the factory that it was really handy to be able to do many different things. And so that's really what kind of Agile is about, right? Doing many different things. Then I went on and I became when they had full-service gas stations, I used to pump gas. And what I learned about pumping gas and in that whole experience was user satisfaction and customer satisfaction. Exceeding the customer's expectations is what got me a tip, right? So I would go there I'd say, "What kind of gas do you want?" Then I would ask them, "Do you want your windows washed?" And they would say yes. And most of the time, they would only expect the front window to be washed. But I would also wash the back window. And so by doing that, I was exceeding the customer's expectations. And in addition to my $2.35 an hour, they may give me a $1 tip. And I was like, that's pretty good, right? So that was what I learned there about exceeding customer satisfaction, exceeding their expectations. Then I went to work at McDonald's. And I started out cleaning the toilets. And eventually I moved up to making the pancakes. And what I learned there about making pancakes was that we would put the batter in with these things like this, and a specific amount would go down on the griddle. Then we would press a button, And when the time was up, a minute and 5 seconds, it would go beep, 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 and then we'd turn it like this, and then it would go beep, 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 and then it would be done. And so what I learned there was all about process and really trying to, I guess you could say, make sure that, dumbify the whole thing to make sure that people didn't make mistakes. Then I went to work I worked in this place that sold fruits and nuts. And what I learned there was really about user experience, because what sold more fruits and nuts, it was in a mall, and I would be shouting out into the mall, try a banana chip, right? And what I learned there was that the placement of things and the arrangement of things is really, really important for the user experience. Then I decided, based on all that I didn't want to do that, and I wanted to go to college. And so I went to Cornell, and what I discovered there was that I thought I was smart, but everybody was smarter than me. And that's what I enjoy about coming to this conference, is that we have so many people here that are just bringing together all this intelligence and being able to interact with everybody. That really is the education. And it's not the professors, but all the smart people around you that creates the education. And so I hope that you can learn something here today. And that's why when I give a talk, a lot of times it's very interactive, because I believe that a lot of the value in the education and the learning that you get is not just one way from here to there, but for all you guys to discuss and interact. So here's what we're going to talk about today. One of you guys asked earlier, what is the difference between usability and user experience? So I'm going to make sure that we cover that today. I will warn you that there's a lot of stuff. And I will set expectations, because I want to make sure that we meet them. The expectation is that I'm not going to read the slides. There's a lot of stuff there. Maybe I'll skip over them. Maybe I'll just cover one particular part based on some questions that you guys asked. Or maybe I'll ask you questions. I really believe in what's called the cone of learning, and that's why I want to get you guys involved in doing possibly some exercises with your own applications. Because if I've sat in talks where I'm sitting, especially if I'm sitting in the back, and about 10 minutes later I think, what did he say 10 minutes ago? I forgot, right? That happens. But if you get involved and actually do something, that usually does not happen. Okay, so let's talk about usability and UX. I think we don't really need to go over this, but mobile is where it's at these days. Everybody is going mobile, and mobile is going to be the hub of all of your contextual data in the future. You see this thing here on my wrist here, this is a mobile wearable device, and all of the data from here syncs up with my mobile. And all of the data from all the wearables are going to be syncing up with your mobile phone. That's where, so the usability of that is just really critical. Expectations have changed, so you always have to keep up with expectations, right? Used to be that a college degree was enough. Now the bar is different, right? You got to have a graduate degree. You got to have an internship. Used to be that we would just show up and take our SATs. Now everybody studies for the SAT, right? So the bar has gone up too with mobile UX. Any questions so far? No?
How high has that bar gone up compared to any relative baseline?
Gee, that's hard to quantify there. I could say 62.5%, but I don't really know the answer. Yeah, but
like in hours, like in let's say if I really wanted to take my career in that direction, how many extracurricular hours outside of work would I need to employ myself in order to stay current in that particular field?
I think that You guys look really alike. You must be related to him. Okay. I think that, it's really hard to quantify the number of hours that you're going to have to put in. They have one of my friends got a certificate in, UX design, and that's like a 30 or 40-hour certificate. So if you want to be an expert, you're definitely going to have to put in the time. For us as developers and testers, I would say, beyond my talk today, you'll probably see little nuggets of things that you're really interested in. And if you work carefully on those nuggets, you could probably be an expert in those areas, relatively quickly if you focused yourself. Okay. Yeah, I used to have 2 of these, and I took one of them off because it was a terrible user experience. How many of you guys have wearable devices? Anybody have wearable devices? Raise your hands. No? Just a couple. Okay. Next year, we're going to do this again. I bet everybody will have them. Okay. Context. Everybody talks about context. We talk about context in testing. There's this whole group of context-based testing these days. But context is a big word, right? What does context mean to you? Danny, what does context mean to you? Okay. What does it mean to you in terms of mobile applications? How's that?
What I hear when you say that is that you've got the phone right there under the nose. I don't know if that's what you mean.
Yeah, that's part of it. When you have a mobile application, the context is much different than and much more variable than when you're sitting at your desk, right? Some of the elements of context could include things like what you're doing. Maybe you're on a train. Maybe you're jogging. Maybe you're talking to some friends, right? You're doing this, or maybe you see a lot of people going like this today, right? Walking across the street like this, not watching where they're going, right? That's context. The time of day, whether or not they're in another conversation, that's all part of context. And so that's one of the big differentiators of mobile UX versus, say, desktop UX, is that mobile UX has many more variables. Location is one of them. I put this here. I thought this was really interesting that I clicked no, of course, on all these things for Google+. I don't want everybody knowing where I am all the time. Do you think that location-aware apps makes your life easier? It does in many instances, especially for geographic type applications. How many of your friends know where you're at based on your application, or what you ate that day, or how far you ran that day? Anybody use those kind of apps that do social sharing? So, Bernard, why do we do that, you think? Why do we share this kind of data with people?
It's a level of comfortability with who you're sharing it with.
Uh-huh.
And what you're willing to put out there. Versus, like you said, sometimes shut it off or you don't want to share it.
Right.
It's okay.
Right. Most mobile applications these days, a big part of the context and one of the biggest features of the mobile app is being able to share that data. And the reason that we want to share that data is because inherently as human beings, we really want to be connected to people. And that's really all part of the user experience. So really, the reason that I'm here and I hope that you're here is really because the mobile phone is really going to be a context funnel for everything. All of these mobile wearable devices, all of these medical things, medical devices, they're all going to be going through, the big data pipe is all going to be going into your mobile phone. So you've got sensors, right? We have data, we have location, time, all this social stuff. That's why big data is exploding so much, because we have all this stuff, right? And making sense of it all is really what we're going to be doing and what's going to be critical in the next years. No, you can't ask a question.
Before you move on,
Okay.
maybe you'll address this, but there's a, here at the ground level, there's pushback. The lack of loss of privacy.
There's a big pushback, yeah. Right. We'll cover some of that too later on. So we have all this data and sensors, and that's what big data is all about, is really collecting. And these are some of the issues in the data, right? The timeliness of the data, the accuracy of the data, reliability of the data, and how do we test all that stuff? Does anybody have any experience in combining all of this data and aggregating it and doing some data verification tests and things like that? No? ETL is the beginning of it, right? And there was a talk yesterday on ETL automated testing. But ETL is going to get a lot more complicated. Here's just one example of a sensor, right? A battery sensor within the phone. There's all kinds of sensors inside your phone. I thought this was really interesting. This application, you put the phone on your bed and it senses how much the bed moves. I don't know if you want to share that data, how much your bed is moving or not, but there are applications that have sensors to do that, to see how well you're sleeping. And context, most of the time we think of context, oh, they just want to sell me more stuff, right? But it's not just about selling you more stuff. A lot of the context-based applications are really geared at trying to make our lives a little better. And a lot of it is about creating and providing anticipatory products and services. Anticipating what we need or what we want, not necessarily by having us sell us stuff, but a big part of the UX in the future is anticipating. What does the user want? What does the user need? What kind of services are they going to be going to next? Some of the problems we have with this are part of the context, and I discussed that a minute ago, which is the distractions that we all have. Some people may be typing at one time and using their mobile phone at the same time, things like that. The screen size, you see the Apple's releasing bigger phones. Privacy is a big deal. You guys already picked up on that. Privacy is a very, very big deal. Tasks suited for mobile, right? What kind of tasks are suited for mobile? Shauna. I did see, I don't know if I'm not being exciting enough or not, but Okay. Right, so in the moment type of applications where things are changing very rapidly. So that's one application that's good for mobile. What else? Photos, right? So things that are time-oriented, maybe you want to buy a gift for somebody and it's their birthday tomorrow. Right? Time-oriented calendars. What else? Geolocators. So things that are in the moment. So you want to, I want to find a store or a restaurant, right? Those kind of things. Context, right. Mm-hmm. And what would you say is things that are not good for mobile phones? Whenever you have, comparing things, doing a lot of reading, right? That's terrible for mobile phones. You can barely see when you want to compare products in different websites. It just doesn't work. Whenever, right? Things that take up a lot of data, use up a lot of battery, right? Complicated tasks. You don't want it. You want and this is something for you to think about. When you start migrating your apps to mobile and thinking about the user experience, you want short 2 to 3 click tasks. And so this is a little bit of where usability, and one of you guys had a question about that, where usability and UX kind of merge together a little bit in that when you complete something, you feel good about it, right? It's part of that instant gratification thing that makes us feel good. So you don't want to have long tasks on a mobile phone. Task prioritization is very important. And just the same thing as they had hotspots on a desktop screen, you have hotspots on your mobile phone. And you can see here that Walgreens, they obviously prioritize, and I guess they make a lot of money selling drugs because they put pharmacy right up there on the upper left-hand side. Costco, you can see what they do with their mobile app. I thought it was really interesting that they put shopcostco.com on the third one instead of the first and second. So obviously they think that you're driving around with they've thought this through. You know, what is a guy going to be doing on his mobile phone? Maybe he's most likely they're going to be driving by a warehouse. Maybe they want to get local deals at that particular warehouse. So one concept I want you to understand is that in terms of understanding the difference between usability and UX is first you have design, right? So we make our application a certain way, we put our buttons in a certain location, we have certain carousels and stuff like that. And from that, you get an effect, right? And the effect is maybe a user makes mistakes. Maybe a user can do something really fast. Maybe maybe they can complete a task or not, right? And then based on that, you have the user experience along with many other things that go into the experience. And I'll talk about that in a second. So we're always, as testers and developers, we're always designing, developing an app, and then evaluating it and trying to get better, right? That's what we're here for. And so when you think about it, some of you that may be working on, if you work for a large company and maybe you're converting an existing app or an existing website and you want to give your users mobile access. I've worked with some clients and they say, oh yeah, we're converting everything. It's really important to think about just what I said, the tasks that you want to convert over. And you can see that Costco, they really thought carefully about what tasks do we want the mobile app to do. So think carefully about that. It's going to be different than the desktop app. You have to really think, okay, well, what part of the desktop app is really suited for mobile, right? I'll touch on some of these. I like to focus on one of the things I like is learnability. And I've done a lot of work in learnability. What does learnability mean to you? Anybody? And why is it so important for our mobile app? Intuitiveness. That's one of the characteristics of. Right. That's a good point. So if you cannot figure out how to use, and I see Dwayne's using his mobile app, so he's trying to see exactly what learnability is all about. If you cannot figure something out, a new app, in maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, what do? Yeah, you just like, oh shoot, this doesn't work too good, and you get another one, right? So learnability, when you go through your mobile app and the way that you design your mobile app, learnability is really, really important. The person that downloads your app has got to be able to figure it out really, really quickly. So think about that very carefully when you design your app and design the tasks and the placement of the buttons and the sequence of things. They really have to figure that stuff out right away, or they're just going to say, oh, well, maybe I'll do something else, right? Right, and that gets back to the business models. Business models have changed, right? So we don't have to buy stuff. We either get it free or we rent it by the month. Maybe we'll just stop our subscription, right? Anybody have any other things that you think are really important for mobile in terms of the usability design? Accessibility? What do you mean by that? Handicapped people, right. Anybody else?
Having available platforms. First thing, I was like a Windows Phone user.
Right? Are you a Windows Phone user?
Nobody even thinks about it.
Yeah, nobody thinks about you guys. Yeah, who cares about you? Right. Okay. So the effect, I mentioned how fast somebody can do something, a task and stuff like that. Effectiveness is whether or not you get your task done, whether you achieve what you want to do. And of course, there's this big piece called satisfaction. And you notice that I colored these things in red that are really important. When you think about designing your mobile app and the usability of it and the UX, you think about what's really critical is really thinking about what users you're designing for. So the context and specified part of that definition, you really need to think about, what are they doing? What are they trying to do? Who are they? What environment are they in? You would design an application for inventory tracking in a warehouse. What kind of characteristics are those users versus users for the United application, United Airlines applications? What would you say? What are the differences of some guy in a warehouse doing inventory? What are his characteristics in his environment? How are those different from me trying to make my reservations on my mobile United app?
Be transactional. They want to get in and out.
Okay.
2 minutes, or one guy wants to use it all day long.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else?
Coordination. In the warehouse, coordination points are less. If I'm in the warehouse taking inventory, I am reporting where the inventory is, and it may not have to go further. In an airline, I have to coordinate with the ticketing, I have to coordinate with the airport schedule, I have to know where the flight is, if the flight get canceled. There's a lot more systems in the airline model that have to all be talking to each other for the app to be useful to me, because there's a lot of different pieces of information that coalesce into a ticket or a flight.
Right. So there's a lot more different types of data and things like that. What else in terms of the app itself? John?
Well, one thing I think that you've got a different, the warehouse person is probably doing a more routine thing, so their knowledge is probably, they're repeating it over and over. The airline ticket person may be someone that's never touched the airline ticketing before, so your app's going to have to be a lot more forgiving, helpful, flexible. One, where the other one can be very rigid.
Yeah, what I think about when I'm thinking about this kind of thing, I think about myself. And you saw I worked in a factory, so I've been in 2 roles. I think of myself using my United app versus the guys in the shop, in the factory that are operating, doing inventory. In the shop, when I worked in the factory, it wasn't very bright out there. It's a little darker. So you have to think about that in terms of the application and the different levels, way that you present the contrast. And also, most people in the factory were bigger than me, and that's why I went to college. And they have bigger fingers, right? So you have to think about the actual users that are out there and what they're doing, what environment they're in, things like that.
We need a long-range barcode reader for the guy taking inventory.
Right.
A lot of times you're scanning stuff up on shelf.
That's right. Yeah, so many things to think about. The main point here was think about your users. You may have a really cool app with cool functionality, but if the guy that's supposed to be using it, maybe he can't figure it out, or he can't see well, or he makes a mistake because his finger's too big, that's bad. So when we do our testing, we think about the task, and we test for the task that user is going to do. Not how cool it looks, not how their buttons are arranged really nice, but how they're going to get that task done. So I want you guys to do this exercise here, work in groups of 2 to 3, and pick an application, and think about the real objective of the application and the top 3 to 5 tasks that the typical user that the app is designed for should be able to do, and prioritize those tasks. Okay, guys, we're ready to go. Let's. Who wants to raise their hand and talk about what they discovered in their objective? And Shauna?
Well, I don't know we discovered anything, but we chose the Etsy.
Uh-huh. Okay. Oh.
So it's like small business people or, private artists and whatnot, when I have the items, so we came up with our list of tasks, prioritize.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of had to haggle from like, when you're trying to prioritize, it's like from whose eyes?
Mm.
Because there's a buyer and a seller, it's more important to prioritizing based on the seller or the buyer's experience.
Mm-hmm.
We need more towards the buyer because ultimately the seller will benefit from sales.
Well, a lot of companies have a different flavored app for a buyer, or two different parties of the same company. So that would.
I don't know if that's have two different apps.
We do.
They do.
Okay.
So I probably have the buyer app.
Okay. Good. So, what did you learn that you have to really consider the role of what the person is?
Well, one thing I learned is like Sue doesn't like to have her her information saved, so she might not be as likely to buy something from the phone. She would probably go to your laptop or something.
Okay.
So, for her, like her priority would be different because she's only planning to maybe look for items there, not
Right.
buy them.
Right.
Someone else might be a higher priority put on
Mm-hmm.
the buying experience.
Right. Right.
So it's
Okay.
depends on if you're browsing or you're buying or the buyer or the seller.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the thing that kind of came to my mind was prioritization kind of depends on what.
Who the person is. Right. Okay. Anyone else? The persona. Right.
We focused on the email labs on our phone.
Oh.
And we all have different phones, so the stock email app is a little bit different between us. So the UI will, have different options and stuff. So focusing on the Gmail app, we were talking about how we need a sense of continuity with what people are used to online and on the desktop to whatever it is that they get on the mobile
Mm-hmm.
platform. Mobile platform should be able to provide you with similar features that the desktop version gives you because it's a sense of continuity and familiarity that you have with something that you typically use on a computer.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the objectives and the top task for somebody that accesses email on their phone would be to read email and organize email, place them on actual folders, and as well as reply to email. One of the things that we determined that may be an issue with writing in the app itself is the loss of context to your email. As you're typing, you're starting to lose a lot of information that you've already typed.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for somebody that prefers typing in landscape, you lose a lot of screen real estate, and that may just be due to limitations that you have on a mobile platform as opposed to a desktop. But that may come as a that using their mobile app to send emails out.
Right. Well, you bring up two big important things there, and that the first one is that the integration between the web and the mobile experience is really important. And the second thing that's important, and that we'll discuss this later, is that the task on the mobile phone, even though it may be the same, like writing an email, is still going to be different, right? Because you're going to be doing how many people write really long emails on their mobile phone? Not very many. So it's still going to be different. So you need to think about that too in the design of the app. Okay, just one more here. Anybody else want to raise their hand?
Well, we did something that was common to all of our phones, which is the App Store app.
The App Store app. Okay.
Or the Play Store app, if you prefer.
Mm-hmm.
So in order, search for apps, evaluate, including preview options, purchase apps, download apps, update apps.
Mm.
Also mention of redeeming. But the other interesting twist is these are all from the buyer's perspective. If I'm a seller, I want people to review my app so it gets more reviews, gets more
Mm-hmm.
stars, and more people buy it and see it.
Well, it's the same thing for them. They probably have a different app for that, right? And I think also you mentioned searching for an app as one of the top tasks, but you didn't mention it seems like the download for an app would be something that you would want to optimize for too, because they want people to download apps, right?
Yeah, well, I guess in terms of, approaching it, first thing that you want to do is search for an app. And in my mind, yeah, I don't want to be bothered with the download. I just want it to happen. I just want to buy and not have to think about it again.
Oh, okay.
Well, I also like the idea of being able to preview an app. Because sometimes they'll give you this little digital movie or just give you information about
Right.
it that doesn't commit you, but can get you excited about it. So if I don't see that, it's like, okay, I don't do a lot of downloading, but that's
Right.
another key aspect is how do they sell and market it?
Uh-huh. Well, you guys touched on two different things. One of them is that sometimes in a mobile app versus a desktop app, you want to combine tasks together to make it more efficient. And the issue that you brought up was in terms of, it's really a lot of this extra stuff has to do with trust, really. And we're going to talk about that in a second. The main thing I wanted you guys to think about and really learn was really that the person and the task and the prioritization of the task is going to be different for your app for different people. So, and this is kind of a big picture of where usability and user experience kind of meld together. And so you can see that if an application is highly usable, if they can get their stuff done, if they can get it done well, if they can get it done without any errors, then they're going to be, that's part of the happiness of the user experience. That's part of it. And then there's these other things here, right? There's other parts of user experience in the satisfaction, like pleasure, likability, and all this comes from ISO. Even though they didn't necessarily think about the details, they did have a good structure. And I know that some of you guys are anti-standards people. But you can use it as a framework for thinking sometimes. And trust is a big deal in mobile apps. And we talked about privacy and security of data and things like that. So think about your app and how does it instill trust in your users. And I'll talk about the convenience and anticipation in a little bit. But I think when I think about user experience, I think one of the big deals these days, especially with this whole thing that people talked about in terms of privacy and stuff like that, is trust. Who you're giving your data to, and do you know that you're giving your data to them or not? And trust really impacts the user's relationship not only with the app, but with your company, right? It's a whole impression of your company. And so, I picked out a couple examples here that one I don't like. On the left-hand side, you can see the Kaiser app. And they have an option, of course, for saving the username because they may want to make it usable, right? But the problem with that is they display my whole username on there. And I don't like that. Because to me, that's not very secure. If somebody found my phone, they'd know my username. Maybe they could guess my password or whatever. To me, I don't like that at all. Whereas on the Fidelity app, they cross out the first 6 characters and they just put part of my username. So it makes me feel a little more secure, a little more safe. It makes me trust them a little more. So what other things can we do inside our application to create or not create trust? Anybody have any good thoughts about that?
You can give a meter to tell how secure it would be. I've seen that on some.
Yeah, they have in terms of like secure of your password, right? If you put in a password and it says, not very strong or something like that, right? That's one way, yeah.
So like privacy concerns, like if you're downloading an app that you don't know may access something specifically, like download flashlight app.
Yeah.
Access to your contacts.
Right. So letting people know that and that's one of the reasons that people are not voting much on the PNSQC photo contest is because it requires you to give all that data. So we don't trust it, right? So creating trust is really important. And I think also one of the latest things that I've seen is creating trust. Part of that also comes from using plain talk, not lawyer talk. Right? So you see in this here, you can't see it very well. It just says, we respect your privacy. Nothing will be shared until you say so. Right? They don't have some really official language down there. But to me, as a normal guy, I think, oh, okay, they understand me. They know that I'm. So using, real normal talk, I think, is one of the latest trends.
It doesn't also depend on the type of app.
Yeah, of course.
If it's a financial app, you're going to want to be.
Yeah, if you have a banking app or an insurance app, app or something like that, it's different. But for most applications on our mobile phones, are not like that, and so you're going to want to have normal talk to create that level of comfort.
Another thing I think that creates trust is not having core features rely on me giving information. If I turn off information sharing, if I say I don't want to share information, I don't want that to hobble half the app, because then it's like, oh, okay, if I want to use this app, I have to share information.
Right.
If you take that choice away from your users, I think that really creates a negative feel about what you expect from what you are trying to expect from your user. You're forcing them to do something.
Right.
To sign off something that should always be an opt-in. Not an opt-out.
So you're making them give something up to get some kind of functionality that may not even be related to what they have to give up. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, one thing is making sure that the application does what it's supposed to do. So if you make that online reservation at United Airlines, you're trusting that when you go to the airport, they're going to have a boarding pass.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that brings up a whole list of things. So when you think about it, the types of applications that we trust are very similar to the types of people that we trust. Think about it. If you have some guy that does a lot of talking and doesn't say a lot, and so if you have lots of stuff on the screen and it's very busy and whatever, do you trust that guy? Maybe not. Maybe a little bit less likely to. Or, like you said, does what they say they're going to do. That's how you develop trust with a person, right? Just like an application. You develop trust with a person when you make an appointment for dinner and they show up. It's the same thing.
How about color?
Color. Color and trust. Well, that's something that.
Bring it up as my bank site is mostly blue.
Yeah.
And it's sort of patriotic.
Right. Well, that's interesting. So who's your bank?
U.S. Bank.
Okay. Well, maybe they've probably done studies that, based on their people, their customers, probably an certain age group or whatever that likes certain colors. I don't know. Maybe if their customers were 12 years old, maybe they would have their app be purple. Who knows, right?
I wonder if we were in studies.
Oh, I'm not aware of that. No. But that's a good question, though. Creating trust and asking permission, that creates trust, right? You always want to ask permission. Here's the plain talk that I was talking about. First of all, acknowledging that you made a mistake or that you don't understand. That's important for us developing our relationships, and it's also important for an application. Shoot, I can't figure it out. Give me another chance, right?
Instead of abrasive system there.
Yeah, right. Instead of, code XYZ, 1, 2, 3, sorry, or whatever, right? Listening, enabling your users to give feedback is another way to develop trust with your users, right? So when you talk to a person and you feel like they're really listening to you, don't you feel good when somebody's really listening to you versus like on their mobile phone? What'd you say, right? This is all about creating that kind of relationship with your users. Right, the recommendations, and they say, fix this recommendation. They're trying to listen to us as users. Here's me ordering a beer there. And this brings me to the next topic of user experience, and that is anticipation. When I order a beer, I don't want to have to ask for a glass, and I don't want to have to ask for a napkin. They should bring that right away without me asking for it. Or if I turn, they put a bottle of beer there and I'm just about to turn around and say, hey, can you give me a glass? They're right there and they bring a glass. That makes me feel like, wow, they're thinking about me, right? And so you have to think about that in terms of your application also. Let's see, I don't know why I already showed that. Let's see, anticipate but don't be nagging. Here's an example of nagging. I was trying to research about this whole Ebola thing, and all of a sudden I see this missing requirements. How does that have to do with Ebola? I don't know. And then I would flip through a couple more, and they show me again, develop more with less, better software, conference east. Yeah, because they tagged me, right? And they just keep throwing this stuff at me, So the point is that don't nag, okay? Yeah. Here's something else. Here's anticipate and satisfy. Here's some Chinese food here I was ordering. Does anybody know what that dish is there? Lotus roots, right. Lotus roots, and here's some vinegar there. And I was just having some dumplings. And we go to this restaurant all the time. And I was sitting there with my wife, and they bring the dumplings, and they bring the lotus root. And I'm like, damn it. And I was like, and she says, what are you mad about? And I said, because they didn't bring me any vinegar. We always ask for vinegar to go with these dumplings, and I've been here 10 times. They should know that I want the vinegar. Everybody has vinegar with their dumplings usually, and it's something that you have to anticipate. Right? And that's what we need to do with our apps. So this is kind of what we've gone through so far. Let's see. Our mobile websites should perform better on the mobile. The functions on a mobile website or on a mobile device that you put there should perform better because they're on the mobile device. Right, so your applications have to be tailored to the mobile device, not just, like WordPress, when they have a website and they call it mobile responsive, right? And they just automatically convert all your stuff onto the mobile platform, but it's not really optimized for the mobile device, right? So that's what I'm talking about. You really have to optimize for the mobile device.
But HTML5 is supposed to do that for you.
Well, there's always supposed to. Yeah. And we have to help people use our stuff. And this is what I call context-sensitive help. We have to help people. It's part of the learnability thing, right? If we don't have this, people can't figure it out, then they're going to get frustrated. And you end up with a terrible user experience. Don't get in my way. Oh.
Sometimes they get those notifications.
Oh, I thought you were talking about me. Okay. That's another issue, right? Okay. So this has become the de facto standard now to show that there's more stuff and horizontal scrolling. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but de facto standard is important. All Windows applications 5-10 years ago used to be Alt F4, file up on the upper left-hand side, right? That's a de facto standard, and people got used to it. Even if it wasn't the best design, people got used to it. So you kind of have to conform a little bit to what people are these days, because mobile apps have become more mature. You kind of have to think about what everybody else is doing. Where are they putting their menu bars? How are they allowing users to go from one screen to another? So you may come up with a cooler design, but users won't like it or won't be able to use it because it's not what they're used to. Web and mobile integration, we talked about that a minute ago. That's really important. This company here obviously doesn't do it, and they acknowledge that, so that's good. This has become the de facto standard in terms of letting users know that there's a mobile app for it, right? They present it on the You can either access their mobile website or you can get a native app. Here's the United version of it. It is, right. Yeah. So that integration is really important. Creating your own ecosystem. I just noticed this the other day. I thought it was really cool that Uber is on the United app. So one of the things that people say about Apple is that they create this ecosystem, right? And that locks users in. No, we don't want to lock users in with our mobile app, but we can integrate with other things that, and you think about, when I say things, actually it's tasks. Think about the tasks that users are going to want to execute from your mobile app. What would they want to do from your app to go outside? And give them access to that. Why make them, open some other app and stuff like that, right? Okay, so we have usability design, and this is the kind of things that we've just talked about. These are the kind of things that we design and test for, okay? Here's a short list of stuff to think about when you're designing your app, and this is just the design portion, not the impacts the user experience, but it doesn't, not all of it, right? We talked about that. This is just has to do with efficiency and effectiveness, getting the job done, stuff like that. So when we think about typing, what kinds of evaluation criteria would you think of in terms of evaluating an app for a user inputting stuff like this? Size, that's good. How much they have to put in, how easy it is for them to put it in. What's that? What they're typing. Button placement, good. That's perfect, yeah.
What was that?
The keyboard doesn't cover up what you're typing. Lisa? Corrections, that's an important one. Good, okay, one more.
Whether they need to type at all, maybe it may be easier for the app to just provide a list of options.
Yeah, drop-down boxes, things like that. Yeah, okay, good. Let's see, okay. So, we want to, I call it reduce the cost. We want to reduce the cost of typing. Not that it costs money, but it costs effort. That's a cost. So you can see here, we want to compute and fill in things if possible. We want to ask for permission, like I said before, about using a location. But a lot of the features of the app may be based on the on the location and may actually help me fill things in, right? So you have to think about that. Okay, so here's some criteria that I would have listed. If I were to list out my criteria of things that when I go through my app, I have a checklist. I say, okay, does it do this? Does it do that? Right? You go through your app, see if it does these things. Does it allow you to delete defaults? I hate it when there's a default in there and you can't get rid of it unless you go with the space bar and go like that. I mean, that's just terrible, right? Okay, and we have widget entry. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but this is a really cool one, I thought. Remember I talked about how you want to prioritize your tasks, and you want to design your app for those tasks. And so what United has done here is they've prioritized these few tasks here, and they use the More button for unfrequent tasks. So I thought that was really interesting, the way that they did that. You want to use even spacing around your buttons, right? You don't want to have, because people get used to moving their hands in certain ways, and you don't want to have different spacing. Scrolling. Usually on a downward list, you don't want to have any horizontal scrolling. Carousels are good to use. helps eliminate mistakes, right? Remember I said I wasn't going to read through these? Okay. Here's another task that I thought was really, really cool in terms of finding a flight and sorting and finding things. And if you go through the different, say, United, Lufthansa, American Airlines, and you just have like 3 top tasks that you would do, what would be top tasks that you would do? You want to find a flight, you want to book a flight, you want to research whether or not they're on time or not. A couple, 3 to 4 tasks. And if you executed those tasks on a couple different sites, you would see that a lot of them do it differently, and you'll be able to use that knowledge for your own app. Did you have a question? No? Okay. Keep in mind that when you're doing all these things, when you're designing your app, think about that your user is going to be distracted by other things. So what does that mean? It has to be fast. It has to only be a couple clicks away. What's this? We talked about the length of the keyboard. Length of the search box is really important. You don't want to have a short search box that you can't put stuff in that you want to search for. Error friendly. I wanted to type in Autodesk and I messed up. And this is the App Store app that you guys were, oh no, this is Fidelity, sorry. They should have come up with a bunch of things that started with auto. So here's the exercise. We won't do that. You know, think about the searches that your user would do, and then list out a couple criteria and evaluate your own app and see how you can improve it. What kind of searches would the Crowd Compass app have people want to do? Maybe they're searching for speakers. They're searching for what is going to be showing at 1:30, right? Navigation. Here's another one. This has kind of become a de facto standard. Remember I talked about de facto standards that kind of become de facto standards and things that your users expect, but it may not be cool, but that's what they expect. Want to minimize clicks? We talked about that. Let users know what they can and can't do. I thought this was kind of cool that they actually trying to improve the learnability. Here's another example of that de facto standard in horizontal scrolling where they're showing those dots there. Okay, here's another exercise that we're not going to do. What time are we ending, John? 3:10, right? Okay. 17 minutes, okay, good. Errors, my dad always used to say, keep it simple, stupid, right? So here's an example of that error message that we had said we didn't want to have, right? Some funny code. That's something you don't want to do. Let's see, I'm going to shoot forward here. Graphics. Want to be careful about graphics. Graphics generate trust because you can see something that you're buying, right? Or something like that, or you can see a person's face or a little bit of their face. But sometimes they may not have any meaning, and if they don't have any meaning, then you have to think about the other part of the user experience, which is performance, right? And how much value is the guy getting from this image? So in your app, think about the icons, think about the images, think about the value that somebody gets from that image versus the performance that you're going to sacrifice from downloading it, or the memory it's going to take up, or the other issues. You want to have it be meaningful, right? So let's just put yourself in the end user's shoes. When I think about this bicycle site here, I think about, okay, can I tell what those things are? I don't know, right?
So you get another de facto standard here between the two apps.
Uh-huh.
Excel Sports. It's the the triple horizontal bars up at the very top.
Oh, yeah, right.
But the app on the left isn't in a de facto location.
Right.
It's in the middle, which I'm like, well, is that the same as the one on the far left? So Walmart has it right because we all expect it to be on the left.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Bernard?
We were debating earlier, what's that called? Pepper, meat stack, hamburger,
Menu.
Menu drop down?
drawers.
Yeah. Okay. I'll step through a couple examples real quick here. Some of them are related to color, which I know one of you guys was interested in. This is a mobile app, and so what is wrong here? What would you say is wrong here? What's that? Yeah, missing a photo. So a photo is important, especially when you're buying things, because that makes me feel comfortable. I'm getting what what am I buying, right? So that's trust. What else? What's that? Yeah. Okay. The other thing is, oops. What's that? You said that the sliding this way?
The progress bar is not complete to the end, so it's not completely loaded to me.
Looks like the page is not completely loaded. Well, it was. It was just sitting there. Okay. Here's another example here. It's good that they use green. It's consistent that this is the way they want you to go, right? Here, they have some fairly meaningful icons, I think, some good images that show what we're doing. Here, I thought this was interesting. They show no prioritization of the task. Sharing and buying is the same thing.
But also, all their buttons are the same, so they're valuing their theme over their priority buttons.
Yeah. And, I thought about this. I said, maybe they do this on purpose. Maybe to them, sharing is just as important as one person buying. Here again, it doesn't seem to be a lot of priority. You can add to basket, add and check out, sharing and buying. It's good to show status. That's really important. Again, we have emptying or checking out. I think that's really weird that they have those two options next to each other. Did you have
Another thing that brings up is that I notice all the prices are, I think that's pounds.
Yeah.
So that brings up another interesting thing about your app is localization and globalization.
Mm-hmm.
Depending upon what your app, the app should actually say, oh, are you not using the system? Well, let me do the conversion for you. Because maybe, depending on the app, you want it to be very easy for the user to determine, oh, what's that going to cost me in my money? Because maybe I am ordering overseas or something.
Right.
So that's kind of the interesting thing about this one. Is like it's all in pounds. So it's like, well, is this a British application or is it because my phone was set to use pounds or this currency? Why is it in that mode? And do I understand why it's displaying that mode? That could be important.
Right. That's one thing that's really frustrating me lately is that when I go, I do a lot of traveling, and when I go somewhere, I still want to see my prices in US dollars. I just hate it when they just throw some other currency at me because they know where I am or something, and they're, like, man, I don't want to see that, right? Okay. Here's an interesting information app, and I thought it was interesting that for some reason, they use black on white or white on black. Here's an interesting one for Fidelity. And this really shows something that's really important, is that they have really thought through this one particular task that they want users to execute, and they do not want them to make a mistake. So they make it very, very simple. There's no distractions, big buttons. This is all you can do. No mistakes on this task. Here's another example, right? Very consistent, not fancy looking. Just get this done. That's what they want their users to do. You notice the pseudo de facto standard on the bottom menu there too. Here's another example of the something that's very simple, right? Not fancy, but you get done what you want to get done. And nobody really doesn't like that. Most people, I think, kind of like Yelp, right?
So I have a question kind of related to this. You're saying boring is okay, but I mean, I would think that somebody would potentially be able to provide you the same functionality with similar kind of icons, but then change up the UI so at least it's a little bit more exciting, and there's a better incentive for the user to go for that app.
Yeah. Well, maybe I phrased it wrong. Boring is okay. It's important for it to be to help users get done what they want to get done first before making it fancy. Yeah. Let's see. We talked about that. Go for the needs at hand. So, this is the exercise from the beginning, really thinking through the task that somebody wants to get done, right? And so where do we as testers, where can we add value? And I believe that, we don't have to have a fancy user interface design degree. There's a lot of simple things, a lot of common sense that we as QA people can really add into the product. And so I'll summarize here. So we want to be quick, right? Want users to be able to get their tasks done quickly. That's really important. We want to think about the user's particular physical characteristics. I mentioned the guy in the factory, right? Maybe they're in the dark, or maybe they can't see well. We really need to put some thought into that. Maybe they're old people. Our population is aging, right? So we need to think about that. Size of letters, size of icons, size of buttons. My dad, I saw him the other day, he's using his hands just don't work the way that they used to be. He just doesn't have the dexterity. So you got to think about those things. And we have to think about the environment. We're not at the desktop anymore. Maybe we're not at the moon, but we're definitely somewhere in between, right? We have to think about color, being consistent in our colors. And I forgot why I put that picture there. Shoot. Oh well. Yeah. Yeah. Oh well. I forgot. Scalability. Yeah. Lastly, one of the last slides I have here. This is my entrance into the photo contest. And I thought this bridge was really cool. But then, I noticed there's all these stuff all around it that makes the whole scene not so cool. And so the point that I wanted to make as far as the way that you design your application and so forth is that, like I say here, my dad said, one all shit can run 1,000 attaboys, right? So, really think carefully through your whole application. Make sure that the user can get done the tasks that they want to get done. Boring is okay initially, as long as they can do that. And try not to have any of these big snafus and some of the things that I've talked about, and you'll be all right. A couple things, sometimes you can go wrong. And here are some screen recording type things that you can use for usability testing if you want to really get into it. as a conclusion for UX, right? We know that UX is influenced by usability, but there's another big component in the satisfaction of the user, which has to do with trust, has to do with satisfying them, has to do with anticipating their needs and what they want. Don't mobilize everything. So think about those top 5 things and mobilize those. I hope that what we've learned today, you can take your application from being a hit or miss, and you've gotten some tools in your head, some knowledge that you can use to make a 5-star app. We always want to continue to evaluate and improve, right? That's our whole goal, really. Lastly, I'll close up a little early with a story. I was in DC the other day, a few weeks ago. You can see this is in April. And I was having dinner with some folks. And it made me remember a teacher that I had when I was in high school. And I remembered an important lesson that he taught me. And you can see he's old now. But after the dinner conversation, I found him. And I called him. And I said, Mr. Larson, I'd really like to come see you and visit you. And he said, okay, sure. So I went to his house, and I said to him, Mr. Larson, I really wanted to thank you for this lesson that I learned from you over 30 years ago now, and I've been carrying it with me all along, and I think about it a lot. And he said, really? What was that? And I said, one day in class, you were assigning homework. And you assigned the homework, and one of the students in the back said, Mr. Larson, that's not fair. You assigned us homework yesterday, and Mr. Greer already assigned a lot of homework earlier in the morning. That's not fair. And he was messing around with his papers at his desk like this, and he stopped like this, and he looked up, and he looked at the student, and he said, when you were born, did the doctor pick you up like this and say, life is fair, life is fair, life is fair? He said, no, he didn't say that. Do your homework. And so I remember this all this time, and I went back and I told him that, and he said, well, if that's the only thing you got out of all those lessons, he said, that's okay, because that's a really important one. And so I hope that today, that maybe you won't remember for 30 years, but you'll remember for at least a couple weeks what you learned today. So thanks very much.